She prayed until her last breath, but God remained silent. The screams from the monastery echoed through the mountains, blending with the tolling of an ancient bell. The sisters knelt in fear, clutching their crosses, while the priest continued his ritual, deaf to everything but his own prayers. He believed this was not death, but salvation. Yet no one could imagine that an attempt to cast out the devil would become one of the darkest tragedies in modern Romania. This is the true story of an exorcism that should never have happened. Before we descend into the story, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps me uncover more places where the past still lingers in the dark. Now, let's return to the story. In the eastern part of Romania, among the endless fields and dusty roads of Moldavia, stands the old Tanaku Monastery. Once considered a refuge for troubled souls seeking peace, it became, in the early 2000s, a symbol of faith gone too far. It was here, in 2005, that a 23-year-old nun named Irena Cornici arrived. A quiet, withdrawn young woman with a complicated past and a long struggle with depression. She had been released from a psychiatric hospital in Vaslui and sent to the monastery to recover through prayer and silence. She believed Tanaku would bring her peace. Instead, it brought her doom. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Irena prayed regularly, helped the other sisters, and rarely spoke. But over time, her behavior began to change. She grew distant, stopped eating, and spent long hours standing before the icons, murmuring fragments of scripture that didn't match any known prayers. The sisters said her eyes became hollow and her voice deeper, as if something else was speaking through her. Father Daniel Corajanu, the monastery's priest and confessor, was convinced this was not an illness, but a spiritual battle. He believed the devil was testing their faith through Irena. In the nearby village, rumors spread quickly. People claimed to see light flickering from her window late at night, even when the room was dark and empty. Tanaku was isolated and poor. There were no doctors, no phones, no real help to call for. The closest hospital was miles away, and Father Daniel didn't trust medicine. He trusted faith. So when Irena's condition worsened, he decided to take action on his own. What he saw as possession, he believed could only be defeated through prayer and holy ritual. No one at the time could imagine that his act of faith would become a tragedy that would echo far beyond the monastery walls. Within weeks, the name Tanaku would appear in headlines across the world, not as a place of peace, but as a chilling reminder of how belief, when blinded by fear, can turn salvation into horror. Irena Cornici had been living at the Tanaku Monastery for just over 2 months when her condition began to deteriorate rapidly. The other nuns noticed subtle changes at first. She stopped eating, responded slowly when spoken to, and sometimes seemed to be listening to something no one else could hear. At night, she was often found in the chapel, standing motionless before the altar with her arms raised, whispering fragments of prayers through cracked lips. Small scratches began to appear on her face and hands, and no one could explain where they came from. When Father Daniel finally called a local doctor, the diagnosis was clear: signs of schizophrenia and a severe nervous breakdown. The doctor urged immediate hospitalization, but Father Daniel refused. He believed this was not a medical issue. It was a spiritual crisis. Medicine cannot heal the soul, he reportedly said, convinced that Irena was being tormented by something far darker than illness. As days passed, Irena grew weaker. She barely spoke, and when she did, Her words made little sense. Sometimes she would laugh for no reason. Other times she collapsed, clutching her head and screaming as if in pain no one could see. Witnesses later recalled that in those moments she looked not human. Her eyes seemed to look straight through you. No one considered that she might simply be suffering from an untreated mental disorder. In the monastery, possession was a word used easily, and in rural Romania, faith often outweighed science. The boundary between religion and superstition was as thin as a thread. The turning point came when Irena tried to set her clothes on fire one night, claiming that voices had told her to burn the evil away. For Father Daniel, this was the final sign, proof that the devil had taken control. That same evening, he began preparing for what he called a ritual of purification. The sisters obeyed, though many were terrified. They prayed for Irena, believing with all their hearts that what they were about to do was right. No one recorded how long the prayers lasted or how many nights the sisters stayed awake pleading for a miracle. All that is known is this: Father Daniel made his decision. The exorcism would take place, and Irena would be freed, even if her body could not survive it. June 14th, 2005. The Tanaku Monastery was silent that morning. A heavy, suffocating kind of silence, the kind that feels like the air itself is waiting for something terrible to happen. The nuns spoke only in whispers. None of them had seen Irena since dawn. She lay in her cell, wrapped in blankets, her eyes closed, murmuring words that made sense to no one. Father Daniel began the morning service earlier than usual. He looked pale and exhausted, but determined. Today, we will free her from the unclean spirit, he said softly. No one dared to object. To him, this wasn't cruelty or punishment. It was salvation. By midday, the monastery smelled of incense. Irena was carried into a small room near the chapel. Inside stood a wooden cross, some ropes, a bucket of holy water, and a Bible. The door closed behind them. Outside, the rest of the sisters prayed, their trembling voices echoing through the halls. Oh, the ritual lasted for hours. Irena was tied to the cross, so, as Father Daniel said, the demon could not escape. She screamed, pleaded for it to stop, and then suddenly fell silent. Only her labored breathing and the priest's chanting filled the room. He sprinkled holy water over her face, pressed the cross to her forehead, and continued to pray. He believed he could see evil leaving her body. When Irena lost consciousness, Father Daniel ordered the sisters to untie her and bring her back to her cell. They gave her a small amount of water and covered her with a blanket. She will rest, he said quietly. She will wake up purified. But Irena never woke up again. Her heart stopped a few hours later. When the doctor arrived from the nearby town, all he could do was write the cause: exhaustion, shock, dehydration. To the medical world, it was a crime driven by fanaticism. To Father Daniel, it was the failure of faith. When the story reached the press, Tanaku transformed overnight from an isolated monastery into a national scandal. Reporters, police, and church officials flooded the grounds, demanding answers. Standing before the cameras, Father Daniel simply repeated, "I didn't kill her. I was trying to save her." News of Irena Cornici's death spread across Romania within hours. At first, it was a short local report. By the next morning, it was a national sensation. Reporters crowded at the monastery gates. The clergy refused to comment, while government officials demanded an immediate investigation. When the police entered the monastery, it looked as if a storm had passed through. A dark room with a wooden cross, ropes lying on the floor, a burned-out candle, and the fading smell of incense. Investigators couldn't believe something like this could happen in the 21st century. One officer later told the press, "It looked like a medieval ritual, fanaticism disguised as faith." The autopsy confirmed the cause of death: dehydration, shock, and suffocation. Irena hadn't eaten in days. She had been restrained for hours, and no medical help had been called. The case was officially declared a homicide and handed over to the court. During the trial, Father Daniel appeared calm, almost serene. He never admitted guilt. "I did what I had to do," he said firmly. "I was saving her soul, not her body." The 3 nuns who assisted him wept during questioning. One fainted more than once. The Orthodox Church distanced itself immediately. High-ranking officials condemned the event as a disgrace to the faith, and the Tanaku Monastery was labeled a dark stain on the church's history. Yet in the small rural community, many still defended Father Daniel. They said he was a good man, a man of faith, that he couldn't have killed anyone, that he only did what he believed was right. A year later, the verdict was announced. Father Daniel and the 3 nuns were sentenced to prison for unlawful detention resulting in death. But it seemed that no punishment could ever truly fit what had happened. The monastery was closed soon after. The wooden cross, the same one to which Irena had been tied, was left where it stood. Over time, grass grew over its base, but locals still whisper that on quiet nights you can hear a faint female voice, praying, or perhaps weeping, behind those old walls. After the trial, Tanaku became a place people were afraid to approach. The monastery stood abandoned, its windows shattered, its walls darkened by years of rain, its cells empty, echoing with memories instead of prayers. The silence that settled there wasn't ordinary. It had a pulse, a weight, a presence of its own. Villagers said that at night, strange whispers floated from the building, faint, rhythmical, like prayers carried by the wind. Some claimed to see lights flickering inside, even though there was no electricity. Others swore they heard footsteps on the gravel path, as if someone was walking the grounds in the dark. And sometimes, a faint scent of wax drifted through the air, though no candle had been lit for years. A few years later, a priest sent by the Orthodox Church tried to bless the site again, but during the ritual, his voice suddenly cracked, and all the candles on the altar went out at once. He left the monastery in silence and never returned. The building was never demolished. It remained, overgrown, empty, and still. Local teenagers sneaked inside at night, filming their adventures on their phones. One boy from a nearby village later confessed he had seen a figure in a nun's habit standing near the wooden cross, staring directly at him. On the recording, only a blurry shadow is visible, and a faint voice whispering, "Don't." Even today, years later, Tanaku is remembered as the place where faith and madness became one and the same. People still come to see the monastery, to take pictures of its ruined walls, but almost no one stays after sunset. Those who have say that once the valley is swallowed by darkness, the monastery begins to breathe again, not with voices, but with the sound of walls that remember everything. Many years have passed since the death of Irena Cornici. Her grave lies in a small village near the monastery. There is no date of birth engraved, only the words, "God knows the truth." People still bring flowers, but no one stays for long. They say that if you stand near the grave in silence, you can hear a faint crackling sound, like fire, even though no candle burns nearby. Movies, articles, interviews all turned the story of Tanaku into a myth. Some called it a tragedy, others blasphemy, and some a warning of how easily the line between faith and madness can disappear. In 2005, the events inspired a film that premiered at the Cannes Film Festival. Even the actors who played in it later admitted that during filming, they dreamed of the monastery. Father Daniel, after serving his sentence, settled in another part of Romania. He never held Mass again and refused all interviews. A journalist who found him 10 years later said he lived in a small wooden house with only one picture on the wall, Irena's. When asked if he regretted what happened, Daniel replied quietly, "When God is silent, someone has to speak for him." The Tanaku Monastery still stands today. The roof has caved in, the walls are cracked, the windows shattered. Yet, from time to time, candles appear inside, lit by no one. They burn for hours and then vanish, leaving behind only the scent of incense. For some, this story is about fanaticism. For others, about faith taken too far. But for those who have seen Tanaku with their own eyes, it is a reminder that evil doesn't always come in the shape of demons. Sometimes, it hides in people who believe too much. After the monastery was closed, the nearby village sank into a strange, uneasy silence. No one spoke about what had happened, but everyone knew. On some nights, from deep within the valley, you could still hear a woman's voice singing. It was the same melody Irena once whispered during her prayers. Those who dared to go near claimed they saw a pale figure standing beside the wooden cross. Her face was impossible to make out, only the slow movement of her lips, as if she was still praying. Journalists who tried to revisit the case reported something unusual. Their audio recordings distorted, voices turned into static, and footage darkened without explanation, as if the camera itself refused to look. One local cameraman who filmed a short piece for a regional TV station quit his job soon after. In his personal notes, he wrote, "I saw her in the church doorway." And that wasn't a person. The village grew quieter each year. The old paths became overgrown, and the bells of the abandoned chapel now ring only with the wind. Yet when that faint sound carries across the hills, the locals still cross themselves and whisper her name, Irena. Today, Tanaku stands in ruins, visited only by those brave or curious enough to seek it out. On satellite images, it still appears as an active religious site, though no one has prayed there in years. Pilgrims come not to worship, but to see the place where God remained silent. Some visitors leave scraps of paper pinned to the walls, prayers, apologies, confessions. Others take photographs. In one image, captured in 2018, a faint silhouette of a woman in white can be seen in the window of the main hall. No expert has been able to explain it. The story of Tanaku remains a haunting lesson, that faith without compassion can become a weapon, and silence can be as cruel as violence. For some, it is proof that evil exists. For others, that belief itself can summon demons. When evening falls over the monastery and the wind moves through the empty corridors, it sounds like a whisper, soft, distant, and sorrowful. And if you listen closely, you might hear the same words that once echoed through its walls. I'm still praying.